Hello, everyone. Welcome to Casual Conversations. This is a Zoom show that originally came out of the brain injury professional magazine, Women versus Brain Injury. And we have continued to interview people that were in that magazine, written articles, researchers, people mentioned. And while not in that episode, I have to say, always in my heart, and for as many years as Pink Concussions has been around, today I have someone very special to introduce you to, representing Love Your Brain. So I would like to introduce you to Kyla. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Katherine, for having me and for this community of everyone who showed up. It's just a pleasure to be here.
Well, I thought we had talked earlier about maybe opening the show in a different way and that you could lead us in a meditative opening presencing moment, and which I've experienced not only in doing the weekly support groups, but in a 4-day retreat that I did about a month ago with you. So I'd love to open that space for you to lead us.
Thanks, Katherine. Yeah, that sounds great to start off with a little bit more experiential learning before we dive in and talk about some of the kind of more technical or didactic information about yoga. So if this is new for you, then feel free to take or leave what I'm offering. And I know people are in various different parts of the world, maybe at work, maybe at home. So we'll do just a few minutes of a little bit of movement and a little bit of guided meditation as a way for us to arrive together. So let's see. I'm sitting in a chair, and you're welcome to stay seated in a chair. If you are, you're also welcome to stand or even lie down on the floor. But if you're seated in a chair, I'll just invite you to find a way to be in your body that brings just a signaling that you are arriving in presence. So you might uncross your legs if they're crossed, place your feet a little more firmly on the floor under your knees. Perhaps you relax your arms by your sides, your fingers are floating in the air. And just take a few moments to subtly shift your weight side to side. So if you're in a chair, you might notice your seat moving side to side, just the transfer of weight. Or if you're standing, just sense down into the connection of your feet to the floor. Just sensing the information that your body is receiving. Eventually arrive in stillness, as much stillness as possible. And let's all take a slow breath in and a slow breath out. Good. Again, slow breath in and let it go. Let's add a little movement along with our breath. So on your next inhale, lift your shoulders up towards your ears. And then exhale, release them down your back. Again, slowly inhale, shoulders lift. And exhale, let them go. One more time. Inhale to lift. And exhale, let it go. And just notice the difference between the movement and now arriving back in stillness. And you might choose to close your eyes or find a soft gaze towards the floor. Just as you begin to draw your awareness inward. Just begin to wash your awareness through your body, just to notice any areas that might feel a bit tense or tight. Perhaps loosen your jaw by moving your jaw side to side. Just feel a sense of gravity pulling your shoulders downward. If your hands are floating in space, just feel as if there were little weights along each finger pad, just drawing your arms downward. Sense the connection points of your seat to a chair or your feet to the floor. Each exhale giving way to the pull of gravity, helping to ground you here. Just notice the steadiness of this connection without any expectation, any need to change it. It's a welcoming of the felt sense of groundedness. Notice the flow of your breath, your body open to receiving each breath as it flows in and out in a pace that's just right for you. As your mind perhaps wanders away, just gently call it back to the movement of your breath. Perhaps noting when your breath moves in and flows out. Begin to direct your awareness towards the space of your heart. Just sensing the warmth and tenderness of this space. Any emotions that may be moving through. Just sensing out to feel the warmth and tenderness in all people who have joined in our time together. Those of you who are here live, those of you who perhaps are joining later. Just sensing into the goodness of your intentions to be here. There are many other places you could be. Let's all take a slow breath in, feel your heart lift and expand. And a slow breath out. And if your eyes are closed, you can begin to gently open them. Coming back to our space and receiving my heartfelt gratitude for being with us today to talk about a topic that I'm very passionate about. So I look forward to some Q&A and to sharing some more. But hopefully that was a nice way to just pause, transition together away from the busyness of life and have a little bit of moment to connect to our bodies, minds, and hearts.
Thank you so much. And that's the space you create anytime that I'm with you. So I appreciate that. And I wanted to ask, so is this where you, when you were younger, is this the space that you thought you were moving into? Has leading people in this way been something that you have always wanted to do?
So that's a great question. My background is certainly more in the kind of competitive athletic sports space. So I grew up in an environment where I gained a lot of self-worth and purpose from being in sports, and found yoga and meditation more towards the end stage of college and transition out of college back into the real world of trying to find a job and trying to be independent. So I very much have resonated with yoga a bit later in life, and it's been a mainstay of mine in terms of managing stress, understanding the truth of my identity, and now through Love Your Brain being a pathway for more holistic rehabilitation and community connection. So I definitely didn't think that I would be here, but find it a really helpful complement to the kind of very competitive space of sports.
What were you doing what was your life like before Kevin's accident?
So Kevin's accident happened in about 10 years ago. So it was on New Year's Day, and I was at that time doing my MPH, so my Master's of Public Health, and was going down a track of working in women's reproductive health services. So Kev's accident, and for those of you who may not know, Katherine Pearce was a former professional snowboarder and sustained a near fatal traumatic brain injury just about 10 years ago while training for the Vancouver Olympics. And that led our family to very quickly learn what traumatic brain injury was. We had never heard of that term before. So at that juncture, my husband, my now husband, Kevin's brother, took a year off of his life to support Kevin's healing journey. And fast forward about 4 years, decided to found the Love Your Brain Foundation to really meet the gap in community-based services for people affected by traumatic brain injury. So at the time I was working more in women's reproductive health, and that was a real pivot point for me academically, as well as in my career trajectory.
And did you feel like it became the family business like that? I mean, not in a business type of way, but were you drawn to it because the man that you loved and his brother, and it pulled you over that direction? What was because the yoga came from somewhere. The yoga wasn't originally part of those early days. So I'm feeling that was your influence on that space.
Yeah, it was a kind of constellation of factors. So Love Your Brain was founded 4 years after Kev's injury. At that time, he had found yoga and was using yoga for his own healing. And he had kind of been through the more formal medical system and was still facing a lot of challenges with his TBI and a lot of challenges accessing spaces where he felt a sense of empowerment, a sense of normalization, a sense of self-efficacy. And he very much found that in yoga because it's so holistic and it can work at the physical level, the emotional level, the social level. So Kevin was using yoga for his own healing. Adam, his brother, started exploring Vipassana Meditation, which is an intensive mindfulness insight meditation practice that for him opened up a new way to be in relationship as a caregiver and gave him just new perspective and kind of flipped the frame around telling Kevin that he should change and really making him revisit that and thinking these are the things that I need to change to have a healthier relationship with my brother. And then at the time I was doing my yoga teacher training.
And that's about the time the movie came out. From the time frame I understood, that Lucy Walker, the director, and the movie all started about 2 years after the accident.
Yes. Yep.
And if you watch the movie, it is one of my favorite movies. I've probably seen it 10 times, and every time I watch it, there's something new in it. But with all of the footage that before his accident, that from childhood, from snowboarding, and then the accident where they're actually filming that day and filming him, leaving in the helicopter all the way through, it's hard to tell where exactly, the director jumped into it, but it was about 2 years out. Mm-hmm. It's called Crash Reel is the movie. And the movie goes through the first year of recovery. And as someone taking care of my son, I guess I don't know. I think it was the publicity people reached out to me. So I was helping to publicize the movie. I actually didn't meet Kevin until 2013. The movie had already been out, and I had done a premiere with Lucy Walker, the director, who's just an incredibly cool woman in New York. And I met Kevin right in the middle of, I was starting chemotherapy. So Kevin's story was very inspiring for me to walk through scary, things to the next stage. So I found it it's an inspiring movie for moving through everything. And it also trails the family for a year. And then I don't think it's ruined the movie, but 1 year out, the family spent an entire year helping Kevin getting back here. And Kevin's like, yeah, I'm going back to snowboarding. And the family's like, and so there's this the movie's kind of ending where Kevin's trying to figure out what he wants to do next. And the family has been in that caregiving role. And the title of the movie's The Crash Reel. And I'm very much related. And I got to meet Kevin's mom that day, but my son, who had multiple brain injuries, was still at the point where he would climb up the pilings out off our dock and, do backflips into the water 20 feet down. And so I went up to her and burst into tears, and she put her arms around me, and I'm like, how do you tell them to take care of themselves? And she's like, I don't know. So that's the point. And so what's really interesting is then watching the organization say, we want to be from the outside, we want to love your brain, we want to be positive, we look at helmet stuff, we look at looking to figure out what channel was what space you were going to own.
Yeah, and what I also appreciate about what you're highlighting is Kevin's his inherent resilience. And certainly there were factors like we had access to fantastic medical services at the University of Utah Hospital, Craig Hospital, to great community services. So we have certainly a lot of privilege that supported Kevin to be where he is today. And he has this internal drive and willingness to continue to work incredibly hard at his healing journey that we really felt like, all right, how can we design programs that connect individuals to their inherent inner resources of resilience that are there, but may just have challenges being fully accessed for a variety of reasons. And with yoga and meditation, since it's a mind-body practice where not only are you developing skills to be more aware of how your mind is operating, you're also developing skills to fine-tune how your body is operating and then connecting them so that there's a multitude of different benefits to help adjust to the ongoing challenges that anyone faces with brain injury, and then also just with the ongoing changes in life.
And I think the caregiver role, where you are at this point when they first are injured, where you're literally making every single decision for the person. And then the person, through all their hard work, gets to a point where I want to make the decisions for me. And at one point, Kevin does go off and snowboards again. And that I'm not the same person that I was before. And then how do you move forward with, I'm not giving up, but is the path back to the person I used to be? And you find you can't go back, because you are a different person having gone through the experience. So how do you move forward with the new you and how your body moves? And so, it's such a beautiful movie because it doesn't line everything up perfectly by the end.
Right. And that's really because people ask us all the time, so what happened next? Are you going to make a sequel? Because the sequel really is the creation of Love Your Brain and the programs that we now offer. And I think, organizationally, we don't actually use the word recover or recovery. We only use the word resilience to get at that exact point that life changes after a TBI, and to try and be the person you were before often only sets people up for disappointment or also misunderstanding among friends and family about what realistic expectations are. So how can we find ways to connect with and cultivate new strengths to find a way to move forward? So yeah, because I know one of the objectives of this talk was to talk about what is yoga, what is not yoga. And I think one thing that I just wanted to make clear for folks is when we talk about yoga at Love Your Brain, are really trying to offer yoga in its comprehensive form. So some of you, and certainly myself in my introduction to yoga, was purely through the physical form. But yoga has 8 limbs or 8 different components that include the yamas and niyamas, which are ethical principles like non-harming, truthfulness, self-discipline, then asana, so then the movement, then pranayama, so breath work. So we did a little bit of this morning. And then pratyahara, so sense withdrawal, dhyana, dharana, and finally samadhi, or sense of holistic well-being. So when we're talking about yoga, really seeing yoga as the holistic lifestyle that is much more than just the physical component. And that's why we feel it maps so well onto the experience of TBI or brain injury, because someone's sense of identity is often shifted, not just physically, but also energetically, socially, mentally. So yoga as a holistic practice has an ability to meet each person where they are in their healing journey.
And I think you can see in the movie the changes that are happening in the family itself. I mean, that it's not just the person that has the brain injury. It really is, it affects everybody in that internal family, the external family. It's just, it sends ripples through, your family community. So, it's beautiful to watch you all, because the sequel to the movie is just going on your website and seeing the programs that are developed, and they are so uniquely the people that I've met that are part of your family. So I see it as I said family business, but I see it as a family mission. It's very personal, what your brand.
Yeah, and Pia is the the president of our board of directors. So it still very much has a family roots. And what's been so exciting is that it's so much bigger than Kevin's story now. And I have the extreme privilege of leading our teacher trainings, where we train yoga teachers and how to make yoga more accessible for brain injury, as well as clinicians, and learn their stories of why they're so passionate about supporting the brain injury community, or our other programming that I'm happy to talk about. But the stories and the experiences of the lived experiences of such a diverse community of TBI individuals is really what is the beating heart of Love Your Brain and gets us up every morning.
And I do want you to be able to list, all that you're doing. But I want to also tell me the direction that you were going pre-COVID, and then the direction pivoting from COVID.
So pre-COVID, we had a vision of our programming really serving as a pathway to community integration. So creating more ability for individuals to participate more fully in their community, knowing that TBI is so isolating. So what our vision is to partner with yoga studios in all 50 states in the US and all 10 Canadian provinces, train yoga teachers in how to offer our research-backed 6-week program that I'm happy to talk a little bit more about, that involves it's a yoga and psychoeducation program, but has movement for functional mobility, pranayama, breathing exercises for concentration and self-regulation, meditation for mood, and group discussion to enhance people's skills and resilience. So we really wanted that to be an accessible community-based support. That's a free program all over the US and Canada. We also work with health, certain neuro rehab centers and clinical facilities to integrate our yoga program in outpatient and some inpatient settings, so that patients affected by TBI and caregivers earlier on in their healing journey have access to yoga-based tools. And then when they're discharged, can access Love Your Brain yoga in their community. And we also offer retreats that are 5-day immersive movement, mindfulness, nutrition, and community building programming across the US. So our goal was really to make our in-person programming accessible and to lead research examining the feasibility, acceptability, and effectiveness of yoga for traumatic brain injury, to help shape the scientific understanding of when yoga is beneficial, when it may not be as beneficial for patients with TBI. So when COVID hit, we of course had to try our best to beta test and be very intentional around, is it possible to offer in a scalable way yoga and meditation through an online platform? So
I just want to say, pre-COVID, you were checking the boxes. The trainings were happening. You were in many states. Like, it was real. You were just getting to the point where it was all really exploding as far as making those community connections.
Yeah, and I see folks like Wendy Waldman on this call, who's from Indianapolis, who's helped at RHI, Rehabilitation Institute of Indiana, and our partner studio Embark, kind of make that bridge and support the continuum of care in Indiana. So hi, Wendy. And yeah, we were really just working with amazing yoga studios, clinicians across the country, and have put that on pause, hoping and still certainly planning to do a relaunch once it's safe. But then, yeah, have shifted everything online, which was a big question around cognitive fatigue and safety of offering yoga and meditation through online. But it's been the program that we did develop has served about, so it's called Love Your Brain Mindset. It's a yoga psychoeducation and community building program. We've, over the past year, served about 2,000 people with TBI and caregivers. Now, outside of the US and Canada, we had even had somebody from Mongolia sign up.
Wow.
So it's been exciting, and also using this as an opportunity to research the usability of, there's a certain set of tools that we offer people as part of this program. There's an educational video, yoga nidra meditation, guided meditation, and pre-recorded yoga class. So we're looking at the research around the usability of those tools and some of the effectiveness. We measure 5 different outcomes: quality of life, positive affect, cognition, resilience, and emotional behavioral dysregulation. So we're also in the process of researching delivery through an online platform.
And I happen to be a part of some of the first batch, right, of people that was released.
Yes, so you were one of the wonderful people that we had in our last round, and we always take participants' feedback for how we can continue to improve it and make it better. But I learned a lot.
It was great, and I filled out forms about how I was feeling and sort of my day-to-day. They were not arduous. They were very, very user-friendly. I did miss the first one out of the 6, but I jumped in and loved the people, the group that I was with, and all the options, I could do them at my choosing at times that I wanted, and then the group part was together. And I was really surprised at how close I felt with the other people. I think there were 6 or 7 of us. And it was really beautiful to make that. It was 45 minutes. It wasn't a huge amount of space and time, but we did connect. And we would watch a video that would bring in the theme that we discussed. So, and then after we finished doing forms sort of on the way out, but none of it was arduous. None of it was painful. None of it I felt guilty for not doing. It was a very giving, loving space that you created. So just having experienced that, I highly recommend it. And there is one going on right now. Are you doing another round of that?
We are just about to start actually, some of the programs just started. I can pop a link in here if anyone's interested in learning more or signing up. We have 2 different pathways, one that offers a live yoga class, and one that's the one that Katherine was mentioning is a group discussion to make it more accessible. People can choose between both options. And the yoga program one is full, but the one that has just group discussion is available. So would love to have folks sign up and share with your network. And
discussions were very positive. We were talking about resilience and connection. And so it wasn't like, of 45 minutes, and people expressed all different emotions, but I always felt we walked out of the gathering together with, another tool, a sense of how people were using that in their lives. It was a very empowering experience.
Thank you for reflecting that back. Yeah, and that's the intention of the curriculum's design. So it's based on Carol Dweck's work, who's a psychologist at Stanford who's pioneered research in the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. And so just the understanding that our mindset is a belief system around our own abilities and potential. And each class is themed around one way of cultivating a growth mindset. So how to continue to use learnings as a springboard for greater growth, especially with TBI, since so many things change, there can be a common thread where people just get stuck feeling like they're defined by their injury. And we're really trying to use this program to investigate that more and build skills in how that's not true. And certainly we all face limitations, but how to approach, for instance, a challenge with a realistic optimism attitude. So noticing limitations, but also still finding a way to have a workaround or still see the possibility in what is possible.
And there's a very good question in the chat about the severity, mild to severe. What are the recommendations for both programs for somebody's ability to access them?
Thanks, Joanne. Yeah, so our in-person yoga program and our Love Your Brain Mindset online program, we don't have any TBI severity stipulations for our eligibility. However, people do have to have some eligibility requirements related to mobility. So the yoga programs, people are able to practice in a chair, but need to be independently mobile. So not using a wheelchair or an assistive device for movement, because there is some transitions from standing to the floor. Also be cognitively able to participate in group discussion and regulate intense emotions. So it's less around mild, moderate to severe. And in our eligibility form, we do ask people to self-report, knowing that that's not going to be entirely reliable, but self-report their level of TBI, mild, moderate to severe, and find that we have actually pretty equal representation among those three categories. So just as you know, somebody can have a severe TBI, like Kevin, for instance, and you would never know he's walking down the street and highly functional. There's somebody with a mild TBI who's experiencing extreme vestibular challenges, headaches, depression, that can't get out of bed. So we don't look at it from that lens, if that helps. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So there's so many different things to talk about. I do want to know, so what in the future would you personally like to see? I know there's the vision of the organization, there's the vision of the family. What gets you excited about the future? What would you like to see?
Well, I feel like with COVID and our just quest, so really the quest of Love Your Brain is to create community and build resilience among people affected by TBI. And it's been a real opening for us to see the potential that online connectivity can have, because even as you shared, it was a question for us, could there still be a sense of intimacy and vulnerability and connection that can happen online? And we very much felt that way through what I've experienced in teaching in our programming and the feedback that we received from our participants. So I think a couple things excite me. The scalability and reach of being able to now serve somebody who lives in rural Montana that otherwise would never have been able to drive to a community-based yoga studio. So really trying to take our program more to where people are, and also knowing transportation can be overwhelming and create a barrier to access in community spaces that's now taken away. Also, our research I'm really excited about. I was going to pop in the chat if there are folks that are interested in the research that we've been contributing to. There's recently been, so for instance, there was a this is not research we did, but there was a meta-analysis of yoga, meditation, and mindfulness for people who've experienced concussion. And I actually will also pop that in the chat because this is just an article about that study. There are 22 studies, and they found significant improvement in a variety of different outcomes, but specifically fatigue and depression. And it just feels like we're at this exciting, more tipping point of seeing yoga and mindfulness as more, as perceived by our Western community as more legitimate rehabilitation modalities. So in our research, we contributed actually the largest study of yoga for TBI that's ever been published, or we had over a 2-year period in our programming. We evaluated pre and post the outcomes that I mentioned before among just about 1,500 people affected by TBI, and found significant improvement in 4 out of the 5 outcomes. So that feels like an exciting contribution and way that more clinical facilities are going to be able to justify getting clinicians trained in these complementary modalities, or referring their patients. And hopefully one day insurance will cover it. I won't hold my breath.
And that is huge. In 2012, I ran a group for 13 girls with, at the time we called it post-concussion syndrome, now prolonged concussion symptoms. And I met with those 12 girls with an athletic trainer, and they could not do, we wanted to do some sort of movement and then sit down and talk. That was kind of the idea. None of the movement the athletic trainer came up with they could do. Everything, leg lifts to sit-ups, everything, nothing worked. It was all triggering. So I brought in a yoga teacher. We did restorative yoga, which was literally lying on their backs, positioning them, working on the stress, and it was in the darkness, and she would really position them. And it was meditation and breathing, but we weren't talking about that. And then we'd all cuddle up in blankets and talk, and they loved it and I loved it, but I had no way to prove that it was helping them. The place that I worked for and the athletic trainer, the facility, they're like, this is costing like $800 a week in room space, 4 hours a week, your athletic trainer, the social worker, the yoga teacher. I know you all think this works, but insurance is not going to cover, no one's going to pay for it. And then that was it. So the fact that you are doing the research, because you can have really great ideas and you can say, well, I think this works, but until you have the data and have an organization like yours to put it all together, none of this stuff moves forward. So, the fact that you have evidence-based approaches, I do believe the insurance companies will eventually come around to reimbursing this.
Let's hope. I hope. Yeah. I mean, we're trying to do our part and recognize that there are limitations to our studies. We're not at the stage where we're running clinical trials or looking at robust control group study design. So there are certainly limitations. And we're just knowing that our programs are free based on the science of resilience, have a manualized process. We do a lot to ensure the fidelity around our teaching teams. There's also, some exciting strengths. And I see that just 2 questions I'll follow up, Rosalind, in the chat. So I believe the meta-analysis around yoga, meditation, and mindfulness for concussion found significant effect size improvements for cognitive fatigue, but definitely take a peek in that study. And then Sandra, Yoga Nidra. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Yoga Nidra, for those of you who may not be familiar with it, it stands for yogic sleep, but it's basically a meditation, a guided meditation designed for deep relaxation that has typically a kind of 10-step process. And some of you may be familiar, I'm trained in integrative restoration, so I-REST. That's a secular yoga nidra, lineage developed by Richard Miller, who's a psychologist. And there's been a lot of research around yoga nidra's benefits for people who experience PTSD or PTS. And since that can be co-occurring with TBI, we do use yoga nidra in our Love Your Brain Mindset program. That's one of the mindfulness tools that people have access to and can be really helpful. We're about to do some research around yoga nidra for sleep among people with TBI, since sleep disturbance is such a common symptom.
Well, that's actually where I used it, is you have this link, and like, there were a couple of times I couldn't sleep, and I'm like, well, I can't sleep. I might as well, listen to that tape right now. So that's actually how I ended up using that part of the 6-week program.
Nice. Okay. Well, that's the hope, is that, yeah, for the kind of rumination or whatever the reason is for challenges with falling asleep, that can be a helpful way to have a structured kind of entry point into sleep.
We had a sleep person, sleep researcher last week we were talking to, and just that importance of sleep, and how dysregulation in sleep leads to endocrine issues and ADH-like symptoms. Or if you're someone like me and you're ADHD to begin with, that plus a TBI plus sleep,
Right.
ends up being cyclical. So that's how I use that, when I woke up in the middle of the night, I couldn't get back to sleep, and you have that spin cycle. When you talk to ADHD people, that you cannot break that with medication. That is literally something you just have to find a way to chop it off. And 2 o'clock in the morning, you don't want to go for a jog. So it was very nice to have here's a short thing I can listen to. And I did found it helped me.
And that's such a just helpful point too, around the benefits also of yoga and meditation, because all of us, and especially with TBI, with rumination and negative thoughts, we call them automatic negative thoughts, and that's one of the
Ants.
So yeah, that's one of the classes in our mindset program. We talk about ants, is finding different ways to get grounded and essentially interrupt those thinking spirals. So in the practice we did right at the beginning of the session, offered a few different anchors. So noticing the connection points of your body to the surface beneath you, or your breath. So guiding your attention. So essentially meditation and yoga are practices of where you're placing your attention. And it can be really helpful for the runaway ruminated thoughts or thinking about the past or the future, to bring yourself back to the present felt sense of your body. The body's always in the present. Or sensory input like sound or temperature. So we do a lot in how we adapt our yoga program. It has a lot of interoceptive cueing. So a lot of cueing around the felt sense of different sensory information, and less about trying to put your body in a specific position.
And everything, I felt very safe in anything that you have ever rolled out. I feel like it's evidence-based. If it's new, you're checking before and after the results. So, I want to make sure that people just don't run to the, as soon as yoga studios open. It's very conscious about how this is presented and how the pieces come together.
That's a great point. Yeah, and one of the studies that I'm most proud of was actually a survey of out of, I believe, 150 of our yoga teachers. We asked them to distill what are the best practices for adapting yoga for TBI, to create a blueprint for other yoga teachers or clinicians who weave yoga into their clinical practice, and distill down different themes for how we adapt. And we run a training that's about a little over 20 hours, the one that Katherine, you did, for how yoga teachers and clinicians can adapt yoga for TBI, because certainly there's a lot of adaptations physically with balance, hemiparesis, spasticity, with vestibular symptoms, also cognitively, a lot around the pacing, some simplicity of language. And as I was mentioning before, to help regain mind-body connection, a lot more in invitation around interoceptive cueing, so versus alignment. So that can be a bit different than other yoga lineages or classes that are more widely available to the public.
And I do believe, as in the medical practice where I'm working, and the long haul COVID people that are coming through that have so many symptoms similar to TBI, I am hoping that this is just something that can weave long haul COVID people into to gain the same benefits.
It's a great point. Yeah, and I think if folks are interested in the intersection of yoga and long haul COVID, I believe there's an organization called the Give Back Yoga Foundation. I think they're doing a conference maybe on this. So I think I recently saw something advertised, if that is a helpful resource.
Well, I could just keep talking to you. I want to switch over to the mode where if you want to unmic and ask, there are some questions in the chat, but since it is conversational, I do want to give a chance for people to unmic to ask a question anyone would like.
And I'm also happy to answer any of the ones that I see in the chat box. If you'd like me to start there, Katherine, whatever.
We are recording this, and I think I'm behind by 1, but usually within a week I'll have it up. And then also Hope, who's on the call, does these great 1-pagers. So it'll be accessible through YouTube. It'll also be accessible to a link to Hope's 1-page notes, which will have all the links on it. And then hopefully over the next month, all of the casual conversations will end up being a podcast, which will be easier to play them back. So does anybody have anyone want to, Kara?
Second, yes. Hi, Kyla. My name is Kara Ferber. I work with Katherine at Pink Concussions. I met Kevin years ago. I believe it was Children's Hospital at CHOP. I think a conference where I met him there, and he spoke, and he and I had a long, conversation kind of thing. And I saw the movie, and this was years ago, but I've always admired both of you from a distance, and thank you. My question is, how do you manage the virtual classes, since participants may have issues with like understanding position descriptions or following instructions, as well as like movement and balance challenges? I feel like, that's a challenge, I guess, for anybody, but especially, with TBI, especially not having, an understanding, it's much better, obviously to be in person. But I was just wondering how you address those challenges with this community.
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that gave us a lot of pause as we were thinking about whether it'd be feasible to transition our program online. And so a couple things, we heavily emphasize demonstration. So we'll often demonstrate first and then have folks perform the movement. We also set people up so that they're invited to have as many kind of household props as available. So setting up near a wall, having a chair close by, using books or pots and pans for blocks, if you're familiar with using blocks in a yoga setting. The pace at which we teach is certainly slower to help mitigate cognitive fatigue, and the structure of our program. So we start seated looking at the camera so that there's already no hyperextension or twisting of the neck. People are kind of more engaged that way. And then usually move to all fours to standing and then back to supine. So it's not like minimize the up and down. And sometimes we do have an assistant who will demonstrate in a chair, so that if there are folks who want to practice a chair-based class while the teacher is teaching a mat-based class, there's that accessibility. Does that help?
The language is very, we were speaking about this earlier. I probably will never teach yoga. I'm pretty sure about that, but spending 4 days in the yoga training for mental health professionals, the language and how we were taught to speak, if it's accessible to you, do this thing. If it's not accessible to you, here's another way. It was such a inclusive, welcoming space. So I think that's a huge component of it too.
Yeah, thanks, Katherine, for just highlighting the invitational language. Everything is by choice. Also having intentional kind of rest periods throughout, with the invitation of, if it feels right for you to continue with rest, if that's most supportive, continue with rest, or if you'd like to, what's most supportive for you, to continue with movement. So really offering check-ins and choice throughout.
And I think that space is, this isn't working for my body right now. I've identified that. I'm going to stop pushing in this direction. I'm going to take myself in a direction that feels better for me. And I think so often we just are flailing in life, like force my body to do something, force my body to do something. So, just the connecting your voice of permission of yourself and your body as a person, but also as an instructor, it was incredible.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, Kara, did that answer or any other follow-up?
Yes, no, yeah, very, very much. I think, in regular studios or, and that kind of thing, there's just, in terms of, for lack of a better word, accommodations or just, and whether it's physical or it's new people, I just think it can be, there's not as much as it should be, or, so I just think that you offer this to the community that is incredibly valuable. Do you reach out to the hospitals, or did they contact you, like the rehab?
It's a both.
It's
yeah,
both.
both and yeah, but we do a lot of outreach to raise awareness about our program since they're free. But one thing that also has been helpful is part of our Love Your Brain Mindset program has an on your own version. So you just get the pre-recorded tools and don't have any weekly live yoga class or group discussion. And that's been helpful for sometimes clinicians who are curious about what you just asked. How is the yoga language? What are the movements? What are the meditations? So folks are welcome to sign up for that on our website as well. And it's free. And you just get a weekly email sent to your inbox with the 4 mindfulness tools. So that could also help if you're curious about the yoga.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Claudia, you have your hand up.
Hi, yes. I'm an athletic trainer actually in South Texas, and I had a question as to the age ranges that we could do this with. So would this be something that would be possible with adolescents, with children, or is it something that we can use more so with adults and any ages kind of after 18? Because I deal personally with high school and middle school students, so anywhere from 12 on up. Would something like this benefit children of that age?
So our eligibility criteria for our programming is 15 to 70. And in terms of the kind of younger age demographic, I think if you have expertise in the younger adolescent age demographic, this certainly has application. We're just mindful because the group discussion has like mature content. And as Katherine was sharing, it can get very heavy. So just wanting to be mindful of kind of what's a mature minor and if they have the capacity for that type of self-reflection. So that's why we have that 15 cutoff. But if, for instance, we have clinicians come to our training to learn what the curriculum is and then use the tools at a variety of different settings outside of that 15 to 70 age range.
Thank you. That was helpful. Thank you.
And I think the tools are so specific that I think if you know your age group, I think using the resources, you'll be able to judge.
Yeah, and a helpful, for instance, Claudia, one of the breathing exercises that we integrate in our program is just a simple belly breath where you count to 2 on your inhale, 2 on your exhale, and you feel your abdomen for more belly breathing. Some teachers who work more with youth have incorporated things like the stuffed animal on the belly that you're probably familiar with. So it's like Katherine was saying, they're very adaptable.
Thanks, Claudia. Kathleen, you had your hand up.
Hi there. I'm sorry. I wrote the question down, and it was just that if we have had one concussion, are we more susceptible? Because one, I had a window fall out and fall on my head. And then a few years later, just walking down the stairs and slipping. Is that enough without hitting our head?
I am not an expert on that. And I have read that there is a higher likelihood and higher risk of repeated concussions or traumatic brain injuries once you've had one. So I believe that is a trend, but I don't know, Katherine, if you have more.
As a non-clinician, but as a social worker, yes, one that it is one of the risk factors for future concussions is having a concussion. And you don't have to have a hit to the head. It can be a blow to the body. If you think of, a race car, sometimes those race car drivers spin out and they're not hitting anything, but literally that spinning, the velocity will cause someone to concuss. Also with figure skaters twisting too.
Wow.
So
Okay,
it's about
thank you so
the
much.
brain space. Yeah, thank you, Kathleen. Rosalind.
Hi, it's Rosalind, but that's okay. I was just curious when I looked on your website, Kyla, like last year before COVID hit, sorry, you had a program, say in London, Ontario, but there's no longer, say, anything in London. And I totally understand everything's online. I'm just wondering how you folks keep up to date as far as what yoga studios or whatever are running your programs. And how we can kind of keep abreast of that. As you can tell, I'm in Canada, but I'm familiar more with Ontario and BC. So I was just really curious.
Great. Yes. Well, when we establish a partnership with the yoga studio, we're actually the ones that do all the legwork in terms of we process. So people sign up, they sign up through our website. So we basically control when people are offering the program or not. So for instance, with the studio in Ontario, actually all of our in-person studios, we are in the process of figuring all the things out around what is capacity going to look like, which studios are even available. So we will not offer any in-person programming in studios until likely October. And then we hope that the studio in London, I think Noel.
I think that's the name, yeah.
Last name, but yeah, we'll have survived COVID because it's just been a real somersault for the yoga industry. So many small studios have closed, sadly.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, keep a lookout on our website. And if there are individuals on this call who have connections to yoga studios who are committed to accessible yoga, want to offer our program, we're always open to looking for new partners.
I see Lisa Love has an interesting question. I don't know if she wants to speak or I can read it out loud.
Lisa, would you like to unmic first?
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Lisa.
Hi, thank you for acknowledging my question. I'm just wondering on physicians, let me get back to it. Oftentimes physicians have kind of that give up, I don't know, and in that kind of a lack of referral to the mental health processes, the psychological processes, the TBI impacts. And are you working with physicians to help them transition their medical model, which is often very money oriented, into a referral that would be working with people that specialize in brain injury and that specialize in that resiliency process on how to overcome and remap the brain?
It's such a just important gap that you're highlighting, and we could definitely do more in that space. A lot of our outreach is around educating clinicians with a baseline understanding of TBI, but what TBI is and why yoga and meditation have benefits, and less around connecting them to specialists who can really support more of a continuum of care for patients. So I think we'd be very open to learning more from you about how you think that we could do that.
And I think until that insurance piece is locked in, I mean, we are going to be dependent on nonprofits. And what I have learned over the years is that the population I work, women with brain injury don't have a lot of money. And sometimes it's food and rent or a rehab experience, whatever that may be. So that Love Your Brain, by taking donations, creates these free programs that are accessible to people. And then it's going to hopefully switch that the insurance companies will start to see the value in the mind-body connection and support this with reimbursements. So, I think that's what you'd like to see, right, Kyla, to move to that area where it is a reimbursable expense.
Absolutely. And in some of the clinical facilities we work in, it's moving in that direction, but there's a lot of conversation around whether you can name it's yoga or use a euphemism. But there's some progress in that area.
One last question, if we have one.
I see Mary Pat Freeman wrote in a question. I don't know if she'd like to read it aloud, or I can.
We have Cheryl right here. Let's go to Cheryl first and then we'll.
Okay, then
Sure.
I read Mary's as well.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. When I first met with the neurologist and told him that I was a yoga teacher trainee and was thinking about using yoga as part of my healing process, he said, "That's whistling in the wind. It's not going to help you at all." And he's, of course, was not correct, but he's come around over time, and my persistence with him and seeing that this is possible. And I think, though, I just wonder if you have suggestions on how to bring this forward to medical professionals in this space, and how to engage them. I'm in Toronto area, and perhaps find ways to get funding to do this kind of work.
Thanks, Cheryl. And I'm sure your efforts to shift this clinician's perspective have had a wealth of dividends beyond you. So appreciate your efforts there. And I think a couple things. I think research is really the language of clinicians in a lot of ways. So continuing to move research forward that has more robust study designs, that trials, and I think that's essential. And I also think that's really why we focus on our training for health professionals, so that students early on in their medical professional career can be introduced to yoga from a personal level and experience it personally, and then see how to apply tools for patients. So I think using the crash reel as education for clinicians around what TBI is, and then hopefully offering some tools that show clinicians that it is evidence-based, and there are qualified trainings where they can learn and use it as a skill that they can apply to better support patients. What do you think?
Kyla, I just see one of
evidence
one of the,
and go ahead.
Okay, that a woman in the audience, she said that she experienced a horrible concussion 15 years ago and still encounters sharp pain in her head above the right ear, and has like dizzy world spins for 1 to 2 minutes. And she said, would yoga still be recommended? Because she also is like dizzy when she's going into reclining positions.
Well, thanks for sharing your personal experience. And this is an example of just the importance of having teachers trained in how to adapt. And certainly we offer, for your point about reclined positions, the invitation to never be reclined, since I know for some people that can be exacerbating of dizziness and other symptoms. So yes, and just the importance of finding somebody that can support you to tailor the practice to your needs. But there's definitely always a way that yoga can be adapted and accessible.
And in the training that we went through, literally every position that could possibly be and all the different modifications were presented to us in photographs of Kyla. You are in all those pictures of, doing different things, but using, sitting in the chair, you do this in this chair, or if you use a wall, you do it this way. It was very, very, again, very clear. The building blocks are all there. And even for someone like myself who will never teach a class of yoga, but I could see the components and how the Lego blocks fit together depending on what you were, how you're building that program for that person. So I do want to thank you so much for your time. And I know people have to start dropping off at the top of the hour here. Any last thoughts you would like to share with the group? And I just loved having you on. We'd have a great time. So
yeah. It's always such a pleasure to be in your presence, Katherine, and just appreciate everyone's questions. And I know this is just the beginning, so feel free to reach out to me. I dropped my email in the chat, so I'm happy to have follow-up conversations about research, programming, yeah, whatever I can do to be supportive.
And the Love Your Brain website has resources, sign up forms. It's a great website. And so there will not be a crash reel 2.
I wouldn't say never, but who knows?
If you want to follow up with Kevin, he is newly a dad. And so you can go on his Instagram and see baby pictures. And so.
Yeah, he's a new dad that is taking that role very seriously.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. And anything we can do to support your work, let us know. And again, Love Your Brain. We support everything that they have going on. And personally, I have done the programs. Someone's putting a heart up there. Kathleen put a heart up. So thank you, Kyla. Thank you to everyone. And we'll see you next week. Marilyn Spivak returns next week for part 2 of Marilyn, which is always fun. And thank you again. And we'll be sending out the link to this so that you can share it with other people. So share freely. Thank you so much. Everyone stay safe.
Much, Kyla.
Thanks,
Thanks, Kyla.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.